Hey, podcast listeners. Bioneers 2023 is coming up April 6th through the 8th in Berkeley with talks from chef and educator Bryant Terry, Othering and Belonging Institute Director John A. Powell, writer Rebecca Solnit, Indian Collective's Jade Begay, author Kim Stanley Robinson, and many more. All 3 days feature interactive sessions, arts and musical performances, movement building, and the Indigenous Forum. Register at bioneers.org with the code NINA20. That's NINA with the number 20 for a 20% discount on tickets. That's bioneers.org. Hope to see you there.
I think what we need to be focusing on is learning how to love this planet. It's a very individual planet. There's probably not another one out there like it exactly. There could be, but not exactly. And we are extremely fortunate to have things working until we came along so well on this planet. And if there can be any purpose to these narratives, say novels or anything like that, we're a narrative species. We love to tell stories. And if we could tell stories that got people more in alignment with, hey, this is a pretty amazing planet. Let's try to love this planet. Let's try to make a decision that's based on other species besides ourselves, because all of us are on this planet. I think that would be a big leap in thinking for many people, and certainly for people who are technologically driven.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello, fellow do-gooders and friends. I'm your host, Corinna Bellizzi. Every week, I invite you to care more about a specific topic or issue so that we can all create a better world together. Today, we're going on a journey to the not-too-distant future when global warming has resulted in certain catastrophic effects, and when advances in technology provide us with solutions that may presently seem more sci-fi than reality, and yet how close that future could be. I'm thrilled to introduce you to an author of screenplays, stage plays, short stories, and audio dramas, also known as story format podcasts. His name is Lee Schneider, and he has worked as a writer, a producer, and director for TV networks and movie studios. He's the founder of Red Cup Agency, an award-winning podcast production agency, and serves as the Artistic Director of FutureX, a platform for futurist projects. His first published novel is called Surrender, a science fiction story that takes place in 2050, and which is available as of February 15th, 2023. Lee lives in Santa Monica, California, with his family. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, just so nice to have you here. Now, I understand as I unpacked Surrender and began reading into it, you really undertook this book specifically as a response to your own eco-anxiety, and I imagine also the need for a creative outlet that you could really feel you owned. But I'd love for you to just share your story and really talk about how that eco-anxiety gave birth to Surrender.
Sure. Well, writing a novel is a long process. It's really a marathon. So you better pick something. And I realized I needed to pick something that would really be a motor to keep going. I'd written all kinds of stuff, as you mentioned in my introduction, and I'd had this book kind of in a gestating state in various notebooks and such for years, but it hadn't really connected. And then, as you experience also, we started getting the fires here north of us, but enough so we couldn't go outside. We couldn't breathe. We have air purifiers running sometimes in our place, but it really took away a big part of, we live in Southern California, it took away a big part of Southern California life. And suddenly I realized, what if you couldn't go outside? What if there wasn't enough water? It really brought it home for me. And that became kind of the motor, if you will, that made me really want to commit to this marathon of writing a long form story like this.
Well, I have to say, the overall of what I've gleaned thus far, and I'm less than 100 pages in, so I still have another, 200 or so pages to read. But as it stands, it almost starts from this disconnected feeling. Like I feel like the characters are kind of disconnected, and you talk about people being modded or modified, which I think is also on the horizon. I don't know if it'll be here by 2050, but really creates this dystopian kind of effect, which comes right down to the cover. Like the way you've constructed the cover reminded me of what we considered futuristic back when film first started to take off with Metropolis, as a for example, kind of that Art Deco / futurist perspective. And so I'd love for you to just talk about how you constructed the book, why you constructed it this way, and perhaps the unlikely protagonist that's at the center of the story as it unfolds in the beginning.
Yeah, those are great questions. Thanks for that. Well, dystopia is easy and utopia is hard. And what I thought about in doing this is part of a 3-part series. So this is the first part. I'm working on part 2 now. In a narrative like this, I don't think you can start with people who are simple. You have to start with people who are wrong about things. Some people are wrong about things and some people are right about things. And part of the game of the book, every book is kind of a game. Part of the game of the book is eventually figuring out who is really on the wrong side of history and who is more likely to be on the right side of history. So you're at that early part of the book where I'm playing around with that a bit. I'm having some authorial fun with that, where I may be sucking the reader into liking a more technical solution or somebody who's doing something that seems like an easy fix. But the people who are struggling with answers, the people who don't know what to do, those are the people that we need to pay attention to because they're really more like us. We're the people in that book who don't know what to do yet, but we're figuring it out. And one of the major goals of writing such a long story is to show somebody figure it out. There's nothing more exciting to me in a movie or a book or anything where you get to see people, the light bulb come on, and they start to figure out how to address this. So that answers part 1. Part 2 is the modding. I think that this has been around since Samuel Delany wrote about it in 1966 in a book called Babel 17. And there's really no doubt in my mind that the tinkering that we've engaged in with the world, this kind of tinkering is going to extend farther and farther into our own psyches, into our own body. And it's not always going to be so great. Just like the tinkering with agriculture, the tinkering with cities, everything we've done in the name of progress, it's a double-edged sword. Sure, there's been great progress. There's been a great engine of prosperity. There's been many good things, but there's also been a lot of negatives that we're just starting to come to terms with now. The book is about that.
It's the unforeseen consequences of our actions,
Yeah,
right? Like we didn't
that's right.
understand when we first started drilling for oil that we would be in this spot today. And so I think your book does, I mean, it's interesting. I'm definitely in it. Like I want to read it. I also have 2 young kids who are chomping at my heels a lot. And so finding time to focus and read it is sometimes hard. But I also don't think that there are very many accidents or of coincidence. And so I wanted to share something that came as a surprise to me today. I was walking the kids to school. As I walked back up the hill to my home, I was scrolling through my phone and I just went over to Chrome and this article automatically cropped up on my screen. And it's from the South China Morning Post. It says, "Respect them," says He Jiankui, creator of world's first gene-edited humans. Now, he's gone to prison for this. He's in jail. He's not likely to be out anytime soon. He says, "Scientists still question ethics of an experiment that the scientist went to jail for. I did it too quickly," he says, who now hopes to develop therapies for inherited diseases. But these 3 gene-edited babies were born in 2018 and 2019. And he's quoted as saying, "They have a normal, peaceful, and undisturbed life. This is their wish, and we should respect them. The happiness of the children and their families should come first." He's basically saying, leave them alone. Don't include them in experiments or things like that. Just let them be. He also goes on to say, like any father, he has high expectations of them, but also has huge unease. And I just felt like this was such an interesting unhappy coincidence. I don't know what to call it, that it came into my feed this morning and it got me thinking about a couple of things. One is that as an author, you are the father of this book. and you will see whether or not people really want to read it. But as we're digging in to the book itself, you have one character who's somehow responsible for creating the reality that they're presently living in, and another character who is now passed on that is also responsible for creating a portion of the social reality that we now live in this 2050 landscape. I mean, I'm already saying I'm in it, right? So, I mean, we're talking now about two things: this unintended consequences, coping with that, and also what are the ethics of some of these technological choices and how do we confront them? Is it with skepticism? Do we welcome them? Do we stress test them more before we decide to go ahead and implement them? And I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is the fact that we're transitioning so much of our use of oil, which is a limited resource. It's obviously degrading our environment by pumping it out of the ground and using yesterday's energy to warm ourselves today and to create energy today, or cool ourselves today and create energy today, to create plastics, to do all these things that are degrading our environment. But then we also, at the same time, are having an increased need for all these rare earth minerals. So we're drilling into permafrost and we're drilling into seabeds, or there are bids now to drill into seabeds to get at certain rare earth minerals, which can degrade ecosystems and have other unintended consequences. So I don't know, in some cases, if we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, to borrow that old adage. And I feel like we almost need more of this novel style exploration and creative thinking to get us to a space where we're really thinking about the long-term effect of our actions beyond what we can see in the immediate future. And I'm just not convinced that as a species, we're good at doing that yet.
Definitely not. But this is the problem right there. There's a lot of species on this planet. We're just one of them. And there's kind of that human arrogance of, if we do this, it will be fine, without really looking at the repercussions and reverberations for all these other species and the planet itself. So when we think about, say, gene-edited babies or chatbots or any number of technological advances that are progress, we have to question, should we do it? Just because we can, should we? And there's a lot, I think, of the gee whiz factor to technology that has crossed a threshold into, well, wait a minute, do we really want to do that right now? Is that what we should be focusing on? I think what we need to be focusing on is learning how to love this planet. It's a very individual planet. There's probably not another one out there like it exactly. There could be, but not exactly. And we are extremely fortunate to have things working until we came along so well on this planet. And if there can be any purpose to these narratives, say novels or anything like that, we're a narrative species. We love to tell stories. And if we could tell stories that got people more in alignment with, hey, this is a pretty amazing planet. Let's try to love this planet. Let's try to make a decision that's based on other species besides ourselves, because all of us are on this planet. I think that would be a big leap in thinking for many people, and certainly for people who are technologically driven.
Well, one of the themes of your book, at least thus far, I should hedge that, is artificial intelligence has impacted our lives in a variety of ways. Now, I had on this show in September of 2021, Mo Gaudat. He was the chief business officer at Google X for a number of years, and he led their more extreme projects and AI and other things. And he wrote a book called Scary Smart. And it was all about our responsibility to teach AI to ultimately, through our actions, because AI is already observing us all the time, make it kinder and be less critical of one another. Don't tell it we just want to see more workout videos or artificially augmented visuals of people. Tell it instead that we care about people, that we care about planet, that we care about each other, that it's not always criticism like the Twitter firestorms that you see. Now, I don't know if we're going to be capable to emerge from that reality with any grace, because so many of us are consumed by our own vanity. And I will admit, I'm scrolling through TikTok these days and going, wow, we're so much closer to this dystopian world than I think I even understood 6 months ago. I'm seeing echoes of the Expanse TV show in my feed, just the way people are choosing to interact live with their audiences and doing extreme things. And even in some cases, not just doing the mundane. But then there's an audience of people sitting there glued to their screen, watching it and commenting on it. And I'm like, what are we doing? This is connection through screen, but disconnecting from one another. And I am not confident that that is a path forward to saving humanity, to saving the planet, to saving ourselves or the other beautiful species that live on this blue dot in the universe.
Yeah, it probably isn't a great way to save all that. I think people need to think about AI as not in isolation. There's AI, and then there's what the AI trains on, which is on the backs of humans. The chatbots like ChatGPT and others, they have learned from the massive stuff that we humans have placed on the internet. And DALL-E 2 and the other Illustrator AIs, well, they're just sucking in all the human effort from images that we humans have put out there. So it's not like they're coming from nothing. They're working from our collected knowledge and essentially kind of colonizing it. The other side is it's not like the Terminator. It's not like an out of control AI that's running itself. These are created by companies who want to make money. Google just invested how much, 10 billion or something like that in a chatbot. And
Dropping the bucket to them.
come on.
Sorry.
Well, yeah, no, it's true. It's nothing, but these are run by people. And we have a tendency, unfortunately, to say, "Ooh, it's an AI," or "It's telling me what to do," and "Ooh, I like that," or "I don't like that." But wait a minute. It's a person, it's a company, it's an investor. If that AI wasn't making money, we wouldn't see that AI anymore if it didn't have potential, didn't have evaluation. So I think we have more control. We have more control than we think, is what I want to say to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some interesting applications, and being that you are also in the world of developing podcasts, I think you'll find this interesting. I just listened to a 6-minute podcast that was put out into my social feed by another person in a podcasting group I'm a member of in Facebook. In the first few minutes, they set the positioning of the show and they said that this was going to be an exploration of an AI generated script and also reading and the individual's voice. And they were going to tell you all about the core elements of what would be needed to develop an AI written and voiced podcast. And I was thinking, I was listening to him like, this sounds really boring. There's like not the right inflection. It didn't sound very natural. And I was just kind of getting the point where I was tuning out. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this is the AI right now. That's what's happening. And then the host came on and said, bet you didn't know that that was XYZ. I mean, if I didn't already have the positioning of knowing that it was about how you could use AI to write a podcast, I might not have guessed it. I might have just thought it was a rather boring show and turned out. Now, AI will get a lot better pretty quick. And that could potentially replace screenwriters like yourself, podcasters like me, who are creating stories and giving vernacular and commentary on the current state of the world. What do you see in the future in that regard? Do you see it starting to erode some of the work that we're presently doing on the creative side?
Most certainly. But some of that work, as Austin Kleon wrote in a blog recently, some of that work deserves to die. And what I mean by
The
that
tedious
is
stuff.
the junk. Yeah. The stuff that has no soul. Writing is a soul transfer process. It's my soul digging into me, digging into my soul, trying to do some soul transfer out to you, a reader. That's never going away because it's human. It's part of being human. But writing meeting minutes or
Oh gosh.
writing marketing copy or
I want to beat my head against a brick wall on
yeah.
some of that. Yeah.
And even in the audio world, I've done 2 podcasts where a lot of the characters were bots. They are AI bots written from scripts that I wrote, and I was a text to speech. Real actors were interacting with AI bots. And I've even done a couple of podcasts. There was a missing piece, like the characters were in an airport and we didn't have the announcement, United Flight 47 leaving in 10 minutes. So I made an AI bot that said that. I looked up all the details, what flight number, when would it go, and then we treated it like it sounded it was in an airport. And it was I could have hired an actor, and I've done that before too, but we used an AI bot to make that voice because it was part of the story and it was real.
And in that
Writing
case, they mostly
scripts,
sound robotic anyway, so you almost need
exactly,
that to make it sound authentic.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was a perfect fit. And when I've used bots in things like podcasts, they are playing bots. I'm not pretending that they're people. Now, I've taught a class for a while at USC, a media making class, and this year, some of the students have started using bots to read the narration of their short films. Some of them because they're very shy, some of them because there were language challenges and they could write a script in English that was pretty tight, but saying that script was a big challenge because English is not their first language. So they used an AI bot. Not bad. I mean, I think that's a pretty good use of it
Yeah.
in that case.
Well, I have used Descript to do some video editing of some of the work that I do. And primarily these days, I just use it for transcription because I like to transcribe episodes that I do solo casts and that I don't send for production and I edit myself. So I'll use it for that. And they have a tool within Descript where you can train the voice, which I've done, and then replace certain words with correct words. Or even, let's say, gosh, I don't know why I'm having a tongue jumble today, but I just can't say this string of words that I normally would be able to say. Type it in and it says it in my inflection, like pretty well trained, I would say. If I didn't know in those cases that it was created by that particular bot, I probably wouldn't have known. My
Yeah.
listeners wouldn't have,
Yeah.
except for the
Yeah.
mouth matching, like if they're watching it on video.
I don't think that's bad. Take the example of there are people who say, I use a paper dictionary, I use a typewriter, I write by hand. Okay, great. I've tried writing with a typewriter and it's horrible. I bought a 300-buck old typewriter and started writing stories on it. And I said, you must be crazy. It's so much easier on a computer. And I spell check and grammar check, and even having Siri read copy for me, those are writing partners for me. I use apps all the time that have some soft AI capabilities to organize writing. I think that's all great, but it's not replacing. There's been a couple of interesting blogs about this recently about journalism, two paths forward for AI journalism. One is where AI helps the writers, and the other is where it replaces them. Both are kind of bad, both are rather bad outcomes, and they're all about efficiencies to save the publisher money. They're not really done because it would be better writing or something like that. It's easier to create SEO friendly, clickbaity stories if you give it to a bot to write.
Yeah, because it can absorb all of what's working on Google today at this minute
Done. Yeah.
because it changes and they shift the algorithm constantly. And the bot can get smart on those things a lot more quickly than you or I could. Absolutely.
Yeah. So some things are deservedly going to get botified, and maybe that'll be okay. Maybe that would be fine. But other things I think will never really be taken away from our humanness unless we allow them to. And if we do that, that's a long, slippery slope down.
Now, I've also heard about, there's a couple things that are just kind of emerging for me and thought. I'm a listener of the show Omnibus, which I'm not sure if you have heard, but they cover all sorts of different topics in the light of keeping it for posterity for futurelings, right? And they covered an episode in which they're talking about, I think they're called Kikigai, but it's these Japanese, mostly men, who are kind of disassociated from common life. They don't really leave the home much. They're more shut ins. They still live at home with their parents. And some of them are now in their 40s, right? And they essentially have rented friends that come and serve them, right? So they'll go with a sister and hang out at a coffee shop and just have time together, have a conversation, get to know one another, and get them out of the house, almost like kind of like a rent a girlfriend, but without the more girlfriend oriented stuff, right? And I find myself wondering in these cases, is it that technology is moving us in a direction where we just get more disassociated from one another when we might have some sort of a social anxiety issue? And technology has made it easier for us to separate with time than might otherwise be healthy. And so Are there going to be tech solutions for this? Or are more people going to disassociate and have a harder time in social systems? So anyway, I just like thinking.
Well, I would say yes, unfortunately, and probably. But there's a movement among younger people now to get rid of cell phones. You had a not a big movement. You had a guest, David Wan, right, who's living in a intentional community.
Yes, he
And
is.
people are starting to think more about how do we have more social connection with real people.
Authentic.
So I think that's going to be definitely a real thing. I've noticed that there are podcast events now where they perform a podcast live as a theater piece, essentially with a live audience. And it's very gratifying and great. So I think that it's a kind of a up to us sort of question. How do we look at these things? Of course, it's easy to do this, what we're doing right now, and it's wonderful. And we get to talk to each other and people can appreciate it. And I wouldn't want to not do this, but it's also connecting with other people is what helps us connect with the world. And that gets back to something David said in the podcast. We haven't done a very good job as a species of figuring out how to fit in here. We've kind of gone our own way. And especially with the added octane of technology, we have tried to separate ourselves from the rest of the world and the other species that live here. And it looked like it was going to work out for a while, but those sort of things catch up with you. This is not new. And that's something that I bring in the book. We may think of ourselves as a superior species, especially with our technology, but eventually these things catch up with you and you have a planet that is not livable. You've had a bunch of guests, very interesting guests on, who have looked at technical solutions and tech solutions for the ills of the world. And some of those, I think, particularly when they involve, say, decarbonization. We have a lot of gas stoves. You had a fellow on who wants to get rid of those gas stoves and do something else. Makes sense to me. Or promoting e-bikes. You had a Ukrainian fellow on who's talking about doing e-bikes.
No, like, why do Americans not use a bicycle the way Europeans do? Often the complaints are, well, it's going to take me longer. Or I live on this steep hill. I live on a very steep hill. Going to the grocery store and back to my home up that hill carrying sacks of groceries would be very, very challenging. And so an e-bike might solve that, especially one that has a 240-mile range and can go 50 miles an hour. I'm laughing, but it's like, it's kind of insane what we can do now.
Well, it's great. Yeah. But all of those technical solutions strike me, they have the potential to be great as long as we can look at them through the filter of, is this going to help us live more wisely on this planet? Is this going to address the real problems of power generation, the way we've organized cities, those really big, like back away, I don't even want to think about it problems, but those are the problems. And if we could start at home with a gas stove, or we could start with driving less, flying less, small incremental things, admittedly, but they start you thinking differently. They start you thinking about how I could fit in with this world. I don't necessarily have to do all these things that could damage the world. Even thinking about things that, well, could this do damage? I wonder if I did another way of doing this. Would that be better? The old shop in a farmer's market instead of going to a big box grocery store. You're benefiting farmers, all of those things. But to get people thinking about that, even thinking about it is the kind of small thing that everybody can do.
Yeah, and I do agree with that. I think we can let eco anxiety take over, or we can work to be part of a solution, or at least try to minimize our own personal footprints and then carry forward these ideas to other individuals. Now, in your bio at the beginning, I mentioned that you were involved in futurist projects. And I want to unpack this because I think people may not understand what that means. They might think they know, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about what a futurist project is and whether they can provide real solutions.
Well, they certainly can't provide solutions, I think. There was an era in science fiction writing, Asimov era and other eras, where those writers were actively trying to figure out what a robot consciousness would be like. There were people who were writing about going to the moon before we went to the moon. And there's a fascinating Washington podcast called Moonrise that takes as its thesis that science fiction writers actually built the pathway for people to start thinking about
Absolutely. I
going to the
mean,
moon.
duh. It's like We have
Yeah.
to be able to envision something before we can
Yeah.
realize it. And it's
Right.
like the fastest runner today is far, far faster than the fastest runner 50 years ago. Why? How? It's not purely because they're superhuman. It's because we could envision it and we could construct better training systems and get better nutrition, not just be eating what everyone else was eating and looking at overall performance and are you getting enough sleep and are you hydrated and what is your muscle carry level of water? I mean, all of it. And so we can essentially get to a space where we can achieve more, we can build new solutions, we can do something like create an airplane that flies in the sky. I mean, there was a time where that was the furthest from reality, or build a wheel in order to be able to create a pulley to then one day build the pyramids or Stonehenge, which before the moment that that existed, there was nothing before. Now, did it start as an idea? It probably had to. It's had to start as a story first, right?
Right. Well, the famous example of Leonardo da Vinci drawing pictures of helicopters, someone visualizes these things. But I think what becomes most interesting for us and most relevant for us now is looking forward, looking back. In other words, be a good ancestor. What does that mean? When our descendants look back to us, are they going to look at us and say they really saved their existence by changing things with the way the dependence on fossil fuels, to take one example? Or, those are the people that really got this thing going downhill. And that's something to think about. In other words, futurism or utopian thinking is a forward thinking and a backward thinking. It's simultaneous. There's a great book called The Good Ancestor, which borrows a lot from First Nations and Indigenous peoples and Native American thinking, where we try to think ahead and we try to think back. What will people think of us if they look back at us, to us? I think that's going to be increasingly relevant now. It filters my thinking all the time.
Well, and I feel like this is the same perspective I've heard from history teachers and professors my entire life. They study history because they think about it from that present day perspective too. And they're always saying things like, if you do not know what has happened historically, then we're going to be the victim of repeating our same mistakes. Now, I think we'll create new mistakes, frankly, because we're really good at
Yes.
creating new things, but we'll also make a lot of mistakes that you can see are connected. Like, for instance, raping one particular resource from an environment like oil, and then just shifting to cobalt, a rare earth mineral needed to create some of these high functioning batteries. Now, what are the conditions of the workers that are mining for that cobalt? I mean, we could have some pretty deep conversations about these things. So I just want to kind of leave that there because I think I wouldn't have thought about this before our connection, but essentially, this show is a futurist show. This show is about getting people to think more deeply about really the present day environment, what we're doing, and how we can create a better future. And I think it's an invitation for people to think more about how they're leading their present lives, or even how life for us in this present society is constructed, because there are some things that we just can't avoid. I mean, even a homeless person living on the street, unsheltered, they have a carbon footprint. And the reality of that is kind of amazing, astounding, unbelievable, like hard to parse, but it's been calculated. The fact is, you can measure all these things now. So, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't think we can go back. I mean, you could start a kibbutz or an intentional community and get some cows and grow things. You could do that, but most people are not going to do that because we've come to really like, flawed as it is, we've come to like our technical world. And I'm not even advocating that people get rid of technology, but I'm asking for context. Often science, for example, is pursued by us as just, well, if we can do it, let's do it. It's adding to the knowledge of humanity. But what about the moral implications? What about the connective tissue? What about context? If you're going to think a lot about how to make a more efficient internal combustion engine, what about not having an internal combustion engine? You have to think outside the limitations of efficiency to solve the problems that we're in now. And that, for me, the keyword there is context and connection. There's a homeless person, there's an unhoused person with a carbon footprint, but what gave rise to that person? Is it the way we build our cities? Is it the way our economy is built to exclude certain people and they get stuck like that?
Well, and it's still less than someone living in a house like mine, right?
Yeah, sure.
However, it's just that it's very difficult to exist in the modern world without leaving negative carbon footprint behind. And carbon has been villainized, even talking about carbon in this way, right? Wanting to be carbon negative, sequester carbon is probably a better way to talk about it. But ultimately, something that Paul Hawkins says is bringing carbon home. Like we're all made of carbon, we're carbon based creatures. Every single being on this planet is carbon based. We just need to bring it back to Earth. And how we can do that is through photosynthesis. Methane is more problematic by something like 80 times because we can't draw it down, because it takes so much more time to come back to Earth just through the power of gravity and air circulation, everything else. So, what do we need to do to limit that? Well, we need to change our farming operations and we need to change how we dispose of things so that we're not just creating septic dumps that create a lot of methane when we dispose of our garbage. Now there are more efforts to take all your bio waste and turn that into something new. Like I just got the chance to interview, for example, Chris O'Brien of Hungry Giant Recycling, and they are working with restaurants and eventually looking to come into people's homes, but restaurants and food production facilities to take their food waste and biodehydrate it in a closed system, which, yes, it uses energy, but hopefully green energy. And then they can take that food waste, and because the bacteria has been killed, any negative bacteria that might be in there, especially if it came from somebody's plate, you don't want it spreading disease, right? It still can be used as soil augmentation because that has the NPK, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium that is needed to help soil get the nutrients that plants need to thrive. And then the microbes can integrate into it and everything can be healthy. But they can also take that same stuff and create dog kibble and cat kibble out of it. And it's healthier than the stuff that you would see the store shelves because it's really just real food that's been dehydrated. So, I mean, I just think these advents, these leaps are really where we need to go. I was reminded when I learned about this, and I didn't say this at the time because I wasn't sure. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone, but there's one moment in that film that I just found really funny. And that was when I can picture the actor, but I'm forgetting his name. He's inside this robot, and the robot is going down this hallway, and it says, "Eat recycled food. It's good for the environment. It's okay for you." And then he comes spilling out of it. It's a comic relief moment, right? But we can actually get to a space where our food waste can still become food and it can live a second life. And ultimately, we can be in a space where we are wasting less because there is so very much waste in the food environment overall. Grocery stores throw away a ton of food, and many of them just lock their dumpsters and don't ever think twice about it.
Right. Yeah. Food waste is a big factor in this. And this gets back to the eco anxiety theme, the idea of there are a lot of very smart people working on this, like Paul Hawken and others, and they have really big solutions. But me, just as an individual, what am I going to do about that? I think that's where there's a book called One Green Thing by Heather White, which it's basically that you pick the one or two things that you can reasonably do. And it does a very good job at helping you understand what type of person you are, how you might fit into this bigger picture. Are you a broadcaster? Are you an influencer? Are you a sage? Do you just love nature? Are you a leader? And it gives you a persona to kind of package up what you might do. For me, it's meant riding a bike, more of my own cooking. It's meant being aware of recycling. And I know these are all very small things in the huge complexity of carbon, but they're very big things for me because they're just shifting my view. And I'm just one person, but it's shifting my view about how I could fit in better on this planet. And you have the Margaret Mead quote in your email signature where it just takes one person, one committed person to begin a movement. And I think this is where we're at with this now. If enough people are nodding and saying, maybe I should look at that, it will create a thought shift, an idea that would eventually became people couldn't even conceive of going to the moon or flying in a helicopter, but someone had to conceive of those things. And we are those kind of conceptual people right now. We could do that, I think, as a group, as a species.
Well, you point to Margaret Mead, the signature in my email. It's there for more than one reason. First, I'm an anthropologist. I'm an archaeologist. That was my schooling. I was ready to go to grad school. I've done digs around the world. I have observed cultures and people for my entire existence. I find people to be incredibly curious beings. And so, as it stands, I think that has led me to this point where I'm really curious whether we can create solutions that come from technology, really. Or, and this is the big or that I ponder often, we really need to get to a more simple life, which is less technology focused and more power of connection, real wood fibers, things made from cotton and wool, and working within our environment as opposed to creating another silicon chip that can go into a device that can make our lives technologically a little better. And so I seriously think about these things, like the cultures that have risen and fallen, like why Egypt happened the way it did, or if you look at Mesopotamia and an entire continent of people essentially getting to a certain point and then all fading into the background. And so the serious question I continue to ask myself is whether all of this will become part of the archaeological record and there will be another human similar to us in 10,000 years looking up at these curiosity of devices, including my Zoom PodTrack P4 here and my microphone, and scratching their head about how we lived because
Right. Well,
it's
yeah.
possible. It's certainly happened before.
Yes, it has. And technology is not an inoculation against our own demise. Technology is not going to save us. What I think will help is when you talk about appreciating the earth, appreciating as simple as good food or real fabrics or a real place to live that feels like it's connected with the earth, to be able to look outside, to be able to go outside and there's not a fire that's bringing smoke in, to not be evacuated, to really be able to live in your home. Those are all very powerful things that connect us with the earth.
To not have PTSD when there's another lightning storm. I mean, I've experienced two incredible lightning storms in my life and probably more than that. But the first was when I was at almost 10,000 feet elevation, staying at my dad's cabin in Colorado. And you're so high up. And when the lightning strikes and it strikes close to you, I mean, it was amazing, but just a display of the power of nature. And then to be here back in September of 2020, let me just say the CZU firestorm came through. I mean, it was a lightning at the end of a very dry year, struck several trees near my alma mater, UC Santa Cruz. I still live near there, and my entire town was evacuated. I had friends who lost their homes, and it was still nothing in comparison to what has happened in wine country in recent past. But still, this is kind of the new reality we're in. We go from fire to flood. My office here flooded just a few weeks ago. And it was because our ground just got so saturated that the cement pad sucked the moisture up through the earth. And I had to replace the flooring with something temporary for now to make sure that I've actually solved the problem before I put a more permanent solution in. But the reality of this new world that we're living in is really that we will start to see the negative effects of our actions 20 to 30 years ago and with increasing severity for a while. And that's not very heartening for some people. That brings the eco anxiety right back up. So, given that you've now written this work and that maybe it's been partially your treatment for this eco anxiety, what have you learned and what do you think people can take from that, from both reading this book and just from your own toolbox shed? What would you share with people to kind of get rid of that eco anxiety?
Well, as I said earlier, right, dystopia is easy, utopia is hard. And yet
Back
we
to that.
have to be optimists and we have to be utopians in some sense. But utopia can come piece by piece, I think. It's not, I'm going to throw away my cell phone and I'm going to trash the computer and I'm just going to live off the land because I like GPS. I like being able to get in the car and get navigated someplace. So I'm not giving up all of those things. But do I own a hybrid now? Yeah. And will I be getting an electric car as soon as I can get one that we like? Yeah. I think that lots of small steps add up to big cultural shifts. And what we're really looking at here is a cultural shift of people opening their arms and opening their hearts and saying, we really have to make some changes here. And we can't just immediately stop everything that's going on, but we don't have to own stock in Mobil or Exxon anymore. We don't have to support banks that give loans to fossil fuel companies. We don't have to do that. That's
Well,
a
most of
choice.
them do. So,
Most do, but you do what you can.
yeah, you do what you
Like
can.
if you have a portfolio, you look at that portfolio. I've gone from talking to like financial people 10 years ago, they would say, "What are you talking about?" Now they say, "Yeah, we have lots of clients who don't want to own stock in those companies that are destroying the planet. So fine, do something better." There are even stock funds that you can invest in that are positive.
Yeah, I've even
So
interviewed a group that has since gone public doing a similar thing where they're making ecologically friendly 401k retirement plans.
perfect.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Part of being a futurist and part of being forward looking is being smart about those things and thinking about how we could better fit in with all the other species here.
absolutely. Now, as we've kind of touched on this topic a bit throughout today, a lot of the solutions that are being posed in the technological space are frankly led by Silicon Valley flat rim dudes who might be called tech bros in some cultures. And there are some that are pretty concerned about that culture overall leading some of these initiatives. So I'm hoping that you can comment on whether you think these concerns, are they justified? Are we moving in a better, more cohesive and inclusive direction or not?
I think there's a lot of work to be done because I think that the VC backed tech bro ish company, they've been part of the problem because it's basically about profit over people. It's basically about creating products. It's basically about using, and this is a theme in the book, using our own consciousness, our own selves to feed the engine of commerce, meaning when we contribute to TikTok and Twitter and Facebook, we're actually giving a little bit of ourselves up for their platform. It benefits us because we get to talk to each other, but it benefits them a lot more, meaning the owners of those platforms. So I would say that there's a mindset that comes with the tech bro culture that is time to be rid of. It's not as simple as saying, well, there should be more female run companies, but I can point to Meredith Whittaker, who used to work for Google, now runs an AI initiative, and a bunch of other people who are often former Googlers who are trying to look at things in a different way, a more inclusive way. Because one thing we haven't touched on that much, it's too big a topic to get into now, but the climate disaster is a problem with race. It is a problem with social injustice. The people who are bearing the brunt are in the global south. The people who are benefiting the most from doing things the way we are in the north and mostly America and countries like that. So, yes, I think that's time for a change, that it brings in more diverse viewpoints. Would be a fix. It's a slow fix, but a very effective one if it can be done.
Well, what are your thoughts about accountability and holding some of these bad actors accountable? I think specifically of Monsanto. They make a great example. And that company name has since dissolved because guess what? Bayer, they bought them and then killed the name Roundup and killed the name Monsanto and just refer to it instead as Bayer. And we'll create a new name for that, just like another pharmaceutical company might come up with another name for something. But yet we are dealing with glyphosate in our water tables that is unavoidable, that is causing disease in people, that is impacting our metabolic systems, that is degrading the health in a documented way of people all over the globe at this point. So, is there a way? Is there a path to holding these giants that have made a lot of money off of the backs of other people accountable and to resolve some of those challenges, some of those inequities?
Let's put it this way. Whoever controls the archive controls the future. And what that means is if you erase the name Monsanto, if people don't know what that product glyphosate is, well, you're erasing a past that we need to know about. And there's been a great podcast called Drilled and a few others. People have made a real effort to preserve the past, specifically oil companies that knew about what they were doing
They
and did it
literally have it in their
anyway.
shareholder reports and private
They have it
messages
in the
and things like.
shareholder report.
I know it's
Right,
some of this is public and then they go out and they lie about it. It's
right.
insane.
But we need to know about that. And the people who are cataloging that are heroes. The people who are talking about that, that's really helping. Just everybody understand better that this has been going on for a long time. It's not something that's been someone just discovered now.
Well, let's
So
talk
I think
about
accountability is huge.
it
Yeah.
is huge, but I'm sitting here. How else do I get this podcast to people but by promoting it? Social channels, right? I go on Clubhouse and talk about it, or I'll put a post out there on any variety of platforms. I actually tried to advertise this show on the Meta platform for a long time, but my ads almost always get squashed. And my posts started to be squashed too as a result because I use words like climate, because I use words like sustainability, because I use words like activism or social issue. And because of these words, because of the fact that I'm communicating about challenges we face, they are considered social issues and Facebook won't actually promote them. They'll say, oh, well, you can go ahead and become a verified person and do it. I do the verified person where I have to like literally send them a picture of me holding my ID right next to my face that they then verify on screen share with somebody that's a physical body out there in Menlo Park to make sure I'm me, and still won't let me run the ads. So I can't have this podcast episode have a little feature go out there if anything that remotely even touches on the topics we're talking about goes out into that space. And so I'm censored. I am
Yeah.
censored.
And well documented. You're not alone. It's well documented that that's what they do.
It's just infuriating. So here, let me create this tool, and the only way you can use it is organically. And even to be organically, I am going to go ahead and quash the number of people that actually see your content because it's considered activistic.
Yeah. Well, I wish I had an answer to this. I really don't, because this is the leading edge of where we are right now. That Facebook Meta is desperate to make even more money and be even more profitable. So they're turning to these sort of turn the screws kind of tactics. Twitter, prime example of a very public meltdown of a once useful platform that is now not useful at all. Some people are turning to Mastodon, which is a very, at the moment, a fraction, but millions of people on Mastodon now. And I think, as Dan Sinker wrote, he's a blogger, it's time to try new things. And when we see for the first time in maybe 15 years or so, these platforms that we've depended on start to crumble or start to become polluted or not useful, well, we have to do what we did in the beginning of the internet, and we have to try new things. We can't go back to the same old places. And yes, it's confusing and chaotic, but I think something good will come out of it in the end because people will build new pathways that are more inclusive.
Well, here. I hope that you're right about that. I definitely hope that you're right about that. So I think that a resounding theme through our conversation here is you uniquely, not uniquely, but you definitely believe that we as individuals can exact change and we can make a difference, each of us in our own, even small ways. I often advocate for people to choose at least just choose one thing to get started. And then it's not overwhelming and you can feel good about the change that you're making. I chose composting as an early avenue because I don't like throwing away food. I'd rather it become soil. And so that's something that I'm actively doing in my home. I also pushed locally for our waste management system to integrate composting into our green waste program, and they now do that. So feather in the cap. But you don't have to be perfect at everything. If you're passionate about fashion, maybe you choose fast fashion as a thing that you want to put into the toilet and say, okay, well, I'm going to make durable purchases and secondhand purchases my new pathway forward for my household. At any rate, these are things that you can choose. And one of the books that I like to do this is Regeneration by Paul Hawken, because he breaks it down into such beautiful chapters. You can inform yourself about specific categories that you might affect. You can learn about the industrial complex of poverty, even, and why that exists and how we're building wealth off of the back of other people. I mean, just educating yourself about these things, I think, is really critical. And I also want to point people to your podcast, The Future of Food. You have 3 seasons out. You hosted 2 of them. So I will say I've listened to a few episodes in the past. I think I'd even sent you a note at one point to see if I could be a guest on the show and talk everything omega-3s, but I don't think you were recording episodes at that point. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, thanks for listening to that show. That's been a really valuable experience and met so many great people. It's been a really fun show to do, and I hope to bring it back for another season.
That's fantastic. Now, if there's a question I haven't asked that you wish I had, what might it be? And if you have one, you could ask and answer it, or you could just leave us with a closing thought.
I think I'd like to leave with a closing thought because I'm so grateful for how well you prepared for this and how much thought you've given to this. The idea that we don't have to be depressed about this, that we can be optimists, we can look at the future from going forward and going back to be good ancestors. That kind of bi-directional futurism, I think, is if we all started doing that, we're going to make it. It's going to be okay.
Well, I have to say, you've mentioned a few books through today. And as a writer, I imagine you also read a lot. So, what I would like to ask you to do as a favor for me and for this entire community of listeners and watchers, those on YouTube, I would love for you to create a reading list, like your preferred reading list, so I could include it with the blog so people can inform themselves a little bit better. I'm sure that we would include One Green Thing by Heather Wright, as well as a few others, but just 3 to 5 books that you think are really great for any would-be environmentalist or climate activists, just to fuel you and really help you educate yourself further.
Cool. Happy to
Thank
do
you.
it.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
To learn more about Lee and his work, visit futurex.studio, or you can visit show notes and click the links directly from there. You'll find direct links to all of the episodes and resources we discussed today, along with complete transcripts on our episode page, and that is available at caremorebebetter.com. This is linked from all podcast platforms and from our YouTube page as well, so you can get straight there. And one last thing. If you did enjoy today's conversation, and I certainly hope you did if you got this far, please subscribe and write us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Think of this like payment for the show. We do it for free, but it does help us reach more people and more people to discover the show. Thank you, listeners, now and always, for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we really can do so much more. We can care more. We can be better. We can even surrender our eco-anxiety and build back better. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.